Yeah.
It should have plenty of battery to get it all in one go. Aim for an hour.
Okay. And if it goes longer, wonderful.
Yeah.
The reality is it's not as simple as that, right? It can be super dangerous, and they're not doing it for the health benefits. They're doing it because I want to win a freaking gold medal. I want to see how hard I can push myself. It was the most physical pain that I've ever been in my life, right? Like your entire body is on fire, not just during it, but for about 10 or 15 minutes after.
Well, it's already rolling, so welcome to A Couple of Fellas. We've got a new guest on the podcast today. How about you introduce yourself?
Happy to be here. Richard Lindemann. I've become friends with Zane after moving to the glorious Austin, Texas. I'm one of the many people who over the last year has decided to make the migration. So I'm excited to be here. There's a number of reasons why I moved here. I'm sure we'll get into those at some point, but really excited to be here. There's just an incredible, even just meeting Zane, it's been great. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to have you on. I hear you're interested in hosting a podcast of your own. I don't know what lessons you could reasonably learn from us fellas, but happy to share whatever little nuggets of wisdom we have gotten in the last 89 episodes. I think this would be 89.
That's impressive. That's a lot of work.
The only thing I'm proud of among it all is that it's been once a week without missing it.
Wow. Yeah, that's consistency. So, well, I brought you a little gift. So we'll do a little taste test here. So we've got the 818 tequila.
I had not heard of that before you walked in with it, I'll be honest.
And you have the Terramana tequila. So arguably we have the two most popular celebrities and their tequilas.
Oh, I'm Team Rock all the way for this.
And so for people that don't know, 818 is Kylie Jenner's tequila, and she was actually canceled for the 818 tequila. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
I actually was not. I'm pretty unplugged.
I believe 818, I could be wrong, but I think 818 is the zip code or the area code for Calabasas.
That sounds right.
And the argument was that it's not really made in Calabasas. It's made in, South America, or I think it might be made in Mexico. And so she was essentially appropriating Mexican labor to create the 818 tequila.
Ooh. That's a cancelable offense for sure.
You never know these days, man. You really never know.
But are her sales doing well?
I think she's killing it.
I would imagine
so.
So.
It's almost kind of the reverse of it. It seems like these days you almost want to get canceled.
Right? It's coming around to the point now on the other side of the hill where it's just any press is good press. It's like good marketing. I've heard of, maybe it's conspiracy theories, but I think I've heard of people theorizing companies doing this on purpose because it means they're in the news stream more than they could ever pay.
Yeah, it's a good point. I having started a couple of businesses and sold one, I think you just start to see some of these trends. And one thing that's really interesting is you'll see a big company like Pepsi, coming back to the Kylie Jenner. Obviously, it all comes back to
remember
Kylie
when she
Jenner.
solved racism with a Pepsi?
Exactly. So that commercial was, basically put a number of people on Twitter in uproar, and everyone said, oh, Pepsi's canceled now. It's going to kill their sales, etc. And the reality was you really just had a small group of people on Twitter that were this vocal minority. And so when the board of directors of Pepsi sees that, and when their, head of HR puts a list of tweets in front of them that says, screw Pepsi, Pepsi's so racist, Pepsi's the worst. You're a 65-year-old director and you say, oh shit, this must be affecting our sales. We need to stop doing this. And so the problem is they're basically being motivated and making decisions based off this vocal minority that doesn't represent their customer base. And I think it's a terrible, terrible way to operate.
So is this why we see so many massive corporations, some trillion-dollar companies, kind of bending over to the current social trends, especially in social justice? Not that I think it's bad for companies to support whatever Black Lives Matter, the movement, or, LGBTQ accept like that, especially initiatives within their company culture. Great. But if you're even a little bit on Reddit or see any memes at all, clearly it's a little over the top what I mean, they'll do, think Nestle,
Mhm.
horrific shit all the time. And then when it's a given day or week or celebratory month, then their tone changes just on social media. It feels like kowtowing. Is that for the benefit of the vocal minority?
Yeah, I think so. It's a really interesting point. I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, you know, you take that Kylie Jenner commercial on Pepsi, it didn't move the needle at all. And in fact, it probably increased sales for Pepsi because it's, you know, you hear the rule, you've got to see something 7 times to actually make a purchase of a product. So you've got to see the brand about 7 times. And so my perspective is, even if it's got negative undertones, you still have that brand awareness in your mind. And when you're choosing between Pepsi and Coke next time, unless you're extremely, extremely on the far left and you're a, you know, just straight up social
An
justice warrior,
activist based on
yeah,
what,
it's just
social
more
media?
availability in your mind for that brand. I mean, this happened. There was a company, I think it's called Nugs or something like that, and they've raised something like $100 million for vegan chicken nuggets. And recently, this guy came out on Instagram who is a pretty popular influencer. And a few months ago, the company had reached out to him and said, "Hey, will you make a commercial for us, or will you make an Instagram testimonial? We'll pay you $250 to do it." And so he said yes. They PayPal'd him the money. He made it. It was a great testimonial, very charismatic. So they started running it as their ad. The ad ended up getting somewhere around like 8 million views. It drove a ton of sales.
Wow.
And was just incredibly effective as a marketing tactic. Well, fast forward a few weeks, and this guy basically realizes, whoa, I didn't sign a contract or anything. I basically just sent them this video for $250, and now they're becoming a huge company because of it. And so what happened is he went on Instagram and posted this massive, basically expose of saying, this company did me wrong, and they're basically using my likeness and my figure for their advantage, and all I got was $200, and we never agreed that they could do this. And everyone starts reposting it and retweeting it, saying, oh man, screw this chicken nuggets company. And my perspective, I had a couple of friends send that to me, and they would say, man, that really sucks for this company. And my perspective was, that's the best thing that's ever happened to that company.
So much press.
Because next time next time the consumer is in the store and sees that brand, they're not going to remember that exact situation, but they are going to subconsciously remember the brand, and they're going to say, I should maybe try that. I've heard a lot of buzz about this. It's front of my mind, and it's, any publicity is good publicity.
I've never broken down, I guess, the steps in the process of why bad publicity is good publicity in those types of cases. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's just like the more synaptic pathways you've built for that particular item or name or brand or logo.
Yeah. Well, there was a recent, I don't know how recent this was, but I think there is bad publicity, and I think it's when someone that has a lot of respect from is just a global icon, essentially what's the word, kind of dismisses the product. So I'll give you an example. Cristiano Ronaldo, I don't know if you remember this at all, but there was a situation where I guess it was after a game, and he's probably the most famous person in the world. I mean, it's probably,
there's a damn good chance.
It's like Cristiano Ronaldo, The Rock, like globally recognized
it might
figures,
be just
right?
them.
It's like Trump, The Rock, Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi.
That's what I would have put in.
They're kind of in that like top 10 tier, right?
What a crazy tier that is.
Right. And they basically, after a game, put a camera on him, and they held out a Coca-Cola, and they were like, Coca-Cola. And he's like, no, water. Coca-Cola sales plummeted for a few months after that, and it dropped like a couple $1 billion off their market cap.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of influence that an individual can have. Damn. That's wild. I can't imagine being that powerful in a very real sense.
Yep.
When you have the clout to just sway the entire internet with your preferences, crazy stuff happens.
It's a different life, I would say. I mean, you have a completely different existence.
Yeah. That's wild. I have a difficult time putting myself in the shoes of somebody in that rarefied air. And I just can't really fathom what that would be like, especially in terms of day to day. Like, are you just in hiding all the time? How does The Rock go around? It has to be in public only. Like,
Yeah.
you recognize that dude. No one looks like that.
Right.
There's no incognito. You either rent out the whole street that you're on or
I
you're in the
know.
public.
I think they're pretty private, and they're pretty much all traveling around with. They have a staff of people, and they have their agendas filled out, and you can't you cease to live a normal existence. But I think you certainly gain a lot of benefits that,
Yeah.
and not even.
I'm not saying I feel bad for The Rock,
but not even just monetarily. I mean, there's so much freedom inherently, and just going where you want to go when you want to go. And I think that's a lot of what drove me to get into entrepreneurship, right? Just being able to have that freedom of, I want to travel where I want, when I want to go to work when I want. I'm still, of course, disciplined. I'm not going to sleep until 10 a.m., but there's an inherent freedom and a sense of control when you're able to be in control of your schedule and also in control of your life and strategy. There's something really gratifying about, sitting down with your team of employees and saying, hey guys, here's our strategy. Here's the goals that we're going to set over the next 24 months. And obviously I take the management perspective of getting their feedback as well, saying, hey, what do you guys think of this? How should we do better? And we can talk all about that later. But the point is, there's something really gratifying about having that autonomy. And frankly, that's a big thing that I'll try to inspire my employees, right? Is come work at a place where you feel like you have autonomy, where you get to be in control of your destiny, in control of the strategy. We might have an overall goal for the company, but it's up to you how you want to implement it and what strategies you want to use to get there. Obviously, I can veto it, or someone above you can veto it, but just the mere act of asking someone, what do you think about this? Or how do you feel about this strategy goes a million miles.
That must increase buy-in and like pride in the collective good, the company, so much.
Yeah.
Having that autonomy, I'm pretty sure I've seen, study after study that is key to having a strong sense of affect and happiness at work. Like job satisfaction, I think autonomy consistently is one of the top things. Oh yeah, I forgot we got on a bit of a tangent, but Jenner's tequila.
Yes,
I'd love to try a sip. She's a billionaire now, right?
I think she just became a billionaire on paper.
At least,
Her equity
assets
is worth.
tied somewhere.
Yeah, so who knows anymore with valuations where they are. So we're going to do a splash of lemon juice in this as well, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I trust your judgment. Ooh, thank you, sir.
I went a little too heavy on my pour, so we might not finish that.
You have to. We have a second type of tequila.
Right.
All right. Cheers. Thank you for bringing
Cheers,
this over.
buddy. Yeah, good to see you.
Ooh, first?
So
I like it.
The reposado. What do you think?
That's delightful. And I've never done it tequila with just lemon juice.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. Let's see. Let me put all 4 artisanal alcohol brain cells I have to work. It's tasty. Maybe it's the lemon juice, but that is one of the smoothest sips of tequila I've ever had. Have you had this brand before, or is this a first-time purchase?
I've had it in a setting that wasn't conducive to tasting it very in depth, but I have had it. This is the first time I've tried it and appreciated it, and I really like the reposado.
I don't know the right terminology, so you'll have to forgive me, but the aftertaste that sits kind of at the back of your tongue is really pleasant. I enjoyed that sip of tequila a lot. Yeah,
so with the reposado, I believe it's aged 12 to 24 months. So you're going to get more of that caramelization and vanilla flavors over the Blancos. That it's going to be a little bit more harsh.
I think I purchased the Blanco because they were out of reposado at the store I went to, and I am a fanboy and wanted to try Team Rock's tequila.
Well, there's a big shortage of tequila now too. It's been, I don't know if you have been following, but as a liquor, I think it's become hands down the most popular liquor. It's, hasn't been, historically, think back 5 years.
I feel like vodka was the thing.
Yeah. People, when you think about going out or getting a cocktail, it's typically whiskey or vodka based drinks. And I think that when you would think about tequila or even just sipping tequila straight, it would always be, hey, this is a party drink.
Yeah,
Or we're going to take tequila and get
the
wild.
crazy night.
But I think with a couple of celebrity influencers, so you have the Casamigos from George Clooney, and then you've got now 818 from the Jenners and Terramana from The Rock. I think people are catching on to this is really good.
I'm a huge fan, and maybe this is, false information that I got when I was younger. But from what I understand, tequila is one of very few types of alcohol that is processed differently in such a way that it is a stimulant rather than a CNS depressant. It's quite possible that any alcohol is CNS depressant or broadly categorized as that, but placebo effect is a real thing. So every time I have tequila, I'm like, this is energizing and buzzing, not just buzzing. I don't know. I'm a fan.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've thought about that a lot and frankly haven't done much research, but I think that with tequila, I do know that the hangovers aren't as bad. So you feel better the next morning. Number two, I also think that I find it hard to believe that you could process ethanol in any sort of way that would make it a stimulant rather than a depressant. So my theory is just that tequila is just inherently a cleaner liquor. And so maybe some of the impurities that are in a vodka or whiskey are taken out of it. And so because of that, you don't feel the depressant effects or some of the negative effects as much. And so you interpret that more as a stimulant effect, perhaps.
I also like the flavor. A lot of clear ones. Like I have Brennivin, which is the Icelandic national liquor. And that's like sharp peppermint maybe, or licorice. Not my favorite flavor. Vodka can be fine, but rarely, unless it's flavored, does it taste good on its own. I'm not great at the brown liquors. I've tried. I've been working on one bottle of, I don't even remember, we'll say Jack or something, for months. And it's very slowly going down. But tequila is a nice sweet spot, especially the Reposado. Like there's an actual flavor to it. As, say, an amateur liquor consumer, you can still appreciate it without needing to build up a palate like for whiskey or some of the darker things. I feel like it hits a nice sweet spot.
I agree. It's do you know anyone that just, because tequila you can drink on the rocks, whiskey, bourbon, drink on the rocks. Do you know anyone that drinks vodka straight up?
I know one, but this kid is kind of an outlier. He's actually been on a bunch of earlier episodes of the podcast. Dylan, if you want to check out any episodes featuring him. Yeah. He, I think he had a recipe for a cheese churger is what he called it. And it was basically a pound of ground beef stuffed full of cheese, lightly fried on each side, and then put on a bun made of more cheese. So it's like largely raw hamburger meat and melty cheese, and he loves it. So kind of an unusual fellow, shall we say. And he brings Dubra, which is the Connecticut regional cheap ass 3 times distilled vodka in a plastic jug, to every party or drinking event that he goes to. He didn't learn about mixed drinks until he was 23. So he just drinks room temperature, dirt cheap vodka as his go-to drink. I don't think that one data point is enough to make an actual trend, but I know one.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. The only one I know, I was friends with a girl back in Charlotte who was I don't want to give too much information away, but she was a college athlete and she was from Russia. And basically she was pretty much born in the middle of Siberia, essentially in a very, very small village, and was pretty much had just an incredibly rough upbringing. And as you can guess, was freezing cold all the time. And so she told me a story once, and I almost find it unbelievable, but it's 100% true, that it was so cold in the winters in Russia that their parents, so they did have vodka, and they would give all the kids vodka to keep them warm at night. So they would literally have a shot or two of vodka before going to sleep. And that's pretty much the only way that you could get through the night.
From what I understand, that would be a bad practice. I think that alcohol.
I'm not advocating in any way.
Not just for the developing child and alcohol part, but actually, I'm pretty certain that this is the correct science behind it. Alcohol makes you feel warm because it dilates a lot of blood vessels, but that brings blood to the surface and to your skin. So you feel warm, but Having more of your blood volume farther out from your core allows it to cool to the environment more quickly. So drinking alcohol makes you feel warm, but it net lowers your body temperature.
Mhm.
So it might actually be a bad practice in terms
Yeah.
of being warm.
Oh, I think it's a horrible practice, but it's a testament to, you always kind of hear that, in northern Russia, they're drinking vodka to stay warm, and it's 100% true. I always thought it was just, sort of an idiom.
Right? Or some type of goofy cartoon stereotype.
Right.
Would you look at that?
Yeah. Yeah.
First-hand account is pretty good. I'm going to say that that's the truth now.
So I'm kind of interested. So you drink alcohol, you feel warm, and the blood rushes to the surface of your body. I think what I'm wondering is anything that kind of gives the illusion of being warm. If you're cooling at your core, what are the inherent health risks with that? I mean, is there a chronic and a immediate effect?
I mean, in the immediate, that's like the flushing you feel if you drink a lot of alcohol and you're in a, consistently temperature enough environment to recognize that your face is flushing. That's like you feel warm. If you've ever been sledding or skiing and people like to have nips on the mountain, same concept, you feel warm. But in terms of chronic, I mean, your body would do a pretty decent job adapting if it was chronic alcohol consumption. There's other issues that come with that, but I think that the only real risk in terms of like a Siberian environment doing that would be if your core temperature actually drops low enough to lead to hypothermia. Probably if like the home or whatever domicile they were in was warm enough that they would not freeze to death, then maybe the shots of vodka before bed actually did help because you at least felt warm and would fall asleep easier. As long as your body's not in actual danger of dropping below that temperature set point, maybe the feeling warm is enough rather than actually being warm.
Right. And I think, and we'll get into this, but so one of my biggest passions is health and wellness and just lifestyle, how it affects physical and mental health. And so it's been a big part of my life. So I think what I'm curious about is, let's say you were able to, if you chronically lowered your body temperature by 1, 2, or 3 degrees, what are the outcomes of that, right? What processes in the body would potentially be affected if you just said, okay, I can turn a switch on now and I go from 98.5 down to like, a chronic 97?
I guess it depends how long of a time it takes to get there as your steady state temperature, because obviously anything that is done physiologically over a longer time period and more gradually gives your body more time to adapt in terms of epigenetic stuff and producing more of the appropriate proteins and other gene products. So if you hit a switch and just dropped to 97, that's not a huge enough change. It probably wouldn't have any real negative effects, I would assume. Yeah, I don't think anything super negative would happen if you just dropped it, but I just imagine generally a gradual lowering is better. My guess would be that, at least to some extent, the balances of those gene products and proteins in your body would shift to better fit that. So some proteins might have a functional range where if they drop below 98 degrees, then they start dropping off in their activity by a significant amount. So those would be less helpful. Your body would probably compensate by producing other similar proteins with similar effects that function better at that temperature range. I don't know how drastic 1.5 degrees would be, but at least enough to shift the balance. There's enough redundancies in pretty much every level of control your body has over everything that I have to assume it would be easily able to adapt in those expression levels to meet that challenge. Would it be better for you? I do not know.
So when you go hypothermic, is this, and maybe you're not an expert on this, I'm certainly not, but I'm wondering what those key physiological processes are that shut down and why they shut down. Does it have to do with the fact that electrons become essentially less conductive? Does it have to do with the fact that you basically have methylations that occur within a certain temperature range? I just don't know what the true cause of death is when you go hypothermic.
Oh, for actual hypothermic now, rather than like 1.5 degrees. So with true hypothermia, I think it's still a lot of that Goldilocks zone. We have, some of my classmates and I have a running joke now, everything is Goldilocks, and it really is. every signaling molecule in your body, every enzyme, every cellular process, all of your metabolism, temperature, pH, everything is a Goldilocks homeostasis game. And a lot of it is temperature dependent. So if you overheat proteins, they'll denature, they'll lose their shape, and then they can't function. If you drop the temperature by too much, then there are probably corollary effects to that happen. It might be a viscosity issue with the cytoplasm, the goo inside the cells. So maybe organelles and signaling molecules and enzymes can't move as effectively. They do their job slower. It kind of becomes like a total system shutdown when you get really advanced hypothermia.
Right.
And then your body sends every signal it can to pull all of that blood in from the surface to try and protect the vital organs at the expense of fingers and toes and periphery. And yeah, things just slow down and then can't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that what actually kills you is the cold, in the sense that basically your metabolism is how you generate heat. Because we're endothermic, you need a certain amount of heat to keep the system going. That's why
glycolysis just straight up stops.
Yeah. Basically every process would gradually stop at different points based on how thermosensitive it is or where exactly in the cell it happens. But yeah, your heat output from fuel burning is not going, and I mean, also kind of a byproduct of every reaction, because there's always a bit of heat lost, is not enough to counteract the environmental sapping of your heat. And then when things get cold, things slow. When things are slower, they can't keep up even more, and it feeds forward until enough processes stop that you lose consciousness and die.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting point, because it's something I think about this Goldilocks zone a lot in the context of my own life and my own health and well-being. And I really think that if you take modern society and the way that we currently live now, the reality is we're extremely comfortable. And we live an incredibly luxurious life compared to our ancestors. And so if you look at our ancestors, I would love a little bit of that.
Absolutely.
If you look at our ancestors, I mean, pretty much on a daily basis, they had evolutionary pressure put on them to hunt, to get food, to be active, to spend time in the sun. And, you know, the reality is, I think that there's something in our core that requires an amount of stress to operate on an optimal level. And so with that in mind, you know, when you pretty much stay inside all day and then sit at a desk and don't really do anything challenge, I think it's tough to get the level of healthy stress. And when you are stressed, it's certainly not a healthy form of stress, what's called this hormetic response or hormetic stressors. And hormetic stressors are basically stressors that are external to your body or your lifestyle that essentially put a healthy level of stress. So going for a run, getting in a sauna, getting in an ice bath, anything that puts your body into an acute stress state, that then your body in reaction turns on a ton of positive epigenetic genes and has a ton of anti-inflammatory effects, and just overall has a very positive effect.
Absolutely. When you have stressors like that, especially when you're seriously exercising and, you know, tearing muscle fibers and stimulating the need to build bone denser and everything else, those also, the body kind of strives for the minimum level of effort that it can exist at for its current state. And when you're putting more of a strain on the body than it's used to, it kind of has to clean house and shape up. And that's very literally what happens. Older senescent cells get eaten by your immune system more. Shitty cells that have problems and even precancerous cells tend to be cleared out, because it's kind of the same process that you see with, God, I don't know, if you want to look at the way that pandemics in the past spread through populations, generally the elderly and the sickly and like individuals in a population are what gets targeted by an external stressor. And the same thing happens in your body. The cells that are less capable of functioning get cleared away. It stimulates new growth and development of new tissue, and that's healthier and stronger. So it's like a very, very literal, putting that stress on does clear out bad shit. Like, you want to talk about crystals and energy drinks that clear toxins or whatever, exercise is maybe the best way to do that.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, I think about this a lot, because it's so you talked about senescent cells, right? And you basically have these cells in your body that are basically in no man's land, right?
In
They're not
retirement.
they haven't, usurped apoptosis, so they're not to the point of being a cancerous cell, but they're sort of just they could become cancerous cells down the road. And so the idea is, you take a fast, for example, a 72-hour water fast where all you do for 72 hours is drink water, you don't eat any food. There's a ton of incredible benefits that come from this. I mean, number one, you're massively improving your insulin sensitivity for when you start eating again. Number two is you're turning on all of these, they're called autophagomes, and they're basically going to go around and eat these senescent cells because your body says, I'm starving right now. I need to maximize resources. Let me go around and use the waste in my body as fuel. And as a result, they're basically clearing out all of the dead, nasty, gross stuff in your body.
100%.
So there's a number of benefits. But, one thing I think about a lot on this topic of stressors in your life, and this is sort of a lesson I had to learn on my own, is that, again, I think that there is this Goldilocks zone, because I know for a fact that, for me at least, there is a threshold at which too much stress on an acute basis. So I'm not talking about stress with work. I'm not talking about stress with the relationships. I'm specifically talking about you go on a run, you lift weights, you go in a sauna, you ice bath. And I've had days where I decide, okay, I'm going to go on an 8-mile run and it's 95 degrees out. I was in Palm Springs 2 weeks ago and it was 113 degrees. And I said, okay, I'm going to go on an I did 8 miles. It was like an 8:10 pace per mile. And I kid you not, by mile 6, I had the thought, literally, there is a 1 in 1,000 chance that I have a heat stroke and die right now. And it was one of the most painful experiences. And what was crazy about it is on mile 6, I was running and I got extremely cold. My whole body started shivering while I was running, and I got goosebumps all over my skin.
Ooh.
And I looked it up later, and apparently that's a big sign of heat
Impending
stroke.
heat stroke. Yeah.
So anyways, my broader point is, I think that if you're going to do things like that, and this is a lesson that I had to learn, you have to recognize that you're not doing it for the health benefits. You're doing it because it builds discipline and because it's a challenge and you want to overcome something and prove to yourself that you can overcome this huge mountain of an obstacle. And so, for me, I think it's just having some self-awareness and realizing, hey man, going for an 8-mile run and then hopping in the sauna for 30 minutes and you feel like you're going to die, you're not adding years to your life. In fact, you might actually be detracting years from your life. But, that's a whole nother discussion. I probably would take those years off my life if it meant that I felt better about my self-esteem and more accomplished and felt more in control of my faculties, etc. But I mean, you even look at Olympic athletes. Who do you think? There's 2 groups that have the highest rates of cardiovascular disease. One is people that are very out of shape and have eaten McDonald's their whole life and struggle with obesity. But number 2 is very high performing Olympic athletes, specifically in endurance events. And so when you think about the stress that they put on their body, they're doing these intense 2-3 hour long workouts per day. And what happens is basically, and I'm not going to remember the exact mechanism behind this, but when you work out at a high intensity for more than 45 minutes, you essentially have an antioxidant mechanism that's helping your heart to basically fend off any of the real oxidative damage that can happen to your heart cells and your cardiovascular system. After 45 minutes, that stops working. And so you can start getting these minor kind of cardiovascular events, artery scarring. You might even start getting kind of small calcium deposits. So the point is, we all look at Olympic athletes and say, those are the healthiest people in the world. They've got the best hearts. They're never going to die of heart disease. But the reality is, it's not as simple as that, right? It can be super dangerous. And, they're not doing it for the health benefits. They're doing it because I want to win a freaking gold medal. I want to see how hard I can push myself.
There's other glory involved in it than living to 100, I think, especially when you're at that level. The motivation is, you're correct, not just about the benefits of exercise. And yeah, you can redline your body for sure. I mean, how many stories of pro athletes have come out, especially in recent years? I feel like there's been a shift where it's more okay to kind of advocate for yourself when you're in the public eye as an athlete. Obviously, there's the physical side, but also we see Simone Biles in other cases stepping down for mental health reasons. So I think that topic is becoming more approachable. But you're hearing case after case of people saying, yeah, the coaches would crush us and push us, and more people got injured, and it sucked to be there, or team morale went down. Like, there's negative effects too to going over the top for sure. And then there are people like David Goggins and Dan Gable who just
So tell
completely
us who,
defy it.
Tell, for those who might not know, tell us who David Goggins is.
David Goggins is an inspirational motherfucker. I listened to his audiobook, or the audiobook of his autobiography.
Can't Hurt Me, right?
Yes, exactly.
Great book.
Fantastic. But at one point in his life, he was 300 pounds, working the night shift as a roach exterminator, drinking double milkshakes, and then going home. And he kind of decided to turn his life around. He lost 100 pounds in 3 months and went to the Navy SEAL pipeline to become a Navy SEAL. I think he got injured out and then went back in a second or third time, but just kept hammering at it. And yeah, he dropped hundreds plus pounds from his frame. He became a Navy SEAL caliber athlete. He'd served in the SEALs, and then now he does ultra marathons. So these 200-mile races over multiple days, and just a psychopath in terms of will and determination. I think he's a great example of redlining until it's not healthy. Mm-hmm. He's got videos posted on Instagram where they're draining a cyst from his knee and they pull a liter of fluid out of his knee and he goes and runs on it that day.
Right.
Like, clearly that's not healthy for those structures. Maybe, sure, if you want to paint it from a different frame of reference, maybe it's healthy for your mental fortitude and your ability to nose to the grindstone and go. But there's trade-offs that you make, especially when you're performing at super high levels like these Olympians or influencers, I guess.
Right. I think there's something really special to be said about dedicating your life to one single purpose and having a single pointed mind of focus towards one goal, one mission, one purpose that you put every single ounce of your being into. And that is something that I actually am personally struggling with right now.
I was going to ask, how would you define your single one?
It's a really good question, because from a really young age, I've been incredibly passionate about business, right? I was the kid that was starting businesses and going and, fishing up golf balls from the lake and selling them on the course for, $5 a ball, and, just always trying to get involved in a number of different ventures. And so I always had this mindset of, I'm going to be a business owner. My goal was always to build businesses and sell them. And so we can get more into that story, but it's always been the biggest overarching theme of my life is to achieve success in business. It's driven all of the books that I read, all of the people that I've met. Whenever I meet someone that has an interest in entrepreneurship or owns a business, even from the time I was, 12, 13 years old, it was always, please just have a coffee with me or tell me about your life. So I think that certain people are born with just an innate interest in something, right? There's no difference between my interest in entrepreneurship and, a guitarist's interest in, ever since he was a kid, he just felt at home when he picks up a guitar. And so I think that where I have the struggle is that I would love nothing more but to work for 100 hours a week on entrepreneurship and do nothing else. But the reality is I have a lot of other passions as well. I've tried to create a very full life with a lot of, interesting hobbies and passions and interests. And so I'm in this dilemma where, number one, sleep is the most important thing in my life. I was in investment banking for a while, and that's sort of you work 100 hours a week, you're going into surgical residency at some point, and you're going to experience 5 or 6 hours of sleep on an elongated basis. And I think that that's okay for a time, right? You can get through it for a year or 2 or 3 years because you have to, and you have to do it for your family. But for me, especially with investment banking, it didn't line up with my core values. It wasn't who I wanted to be. I was learning a ton and it was incredible experience, but it was really a stepping stone to become a business owner and to understand how to raise capital, how to talk to investors, how to, build a pitch deck and a financial model, everything that you need to be a successful business owner. And so, the issue arose where, one, I wasn't getting a ton of sleep and I realized I'm not happy. I'm struggling with depression and anxiety. And I'm basically going on a long tangent to say that sleep is really fucking important.
Absolutely. I'm on your side with that one.
Yeah. And so you take that. So sleep is super important to me. I have to work out every single morning, which is a whole nother interesting conversation about having a dependency on the endorphins that you get from working out. I don't know if you have any relatability to this, but I've been thinking about this a lot. And I was talking to a friend about this and I was saying, I feel really bad when I don't work out first thing in the morning. And
I feel bad and my self-image suffers. I am a much ruder critiquer of myself on days or series of days where I'm not going to the gym. That's an important part of, I don't want to say self-worth, but satisfaction with self.
Yeah,
at
feeling
least.
like you accomplished something or feeling like you're in alignment with your goals. And hey, I'm the person that works out every day. I didn't work out today. I'm not in alignment with my true self.
I'm letting me down.
Mm-hmm. But I think there's something more physiological going on, and that's that. So you take a heroin addict, for example. If you put someone on a really low dose of heroin every single day for an entire year, you're going to create a physical dependency on that. And the effect of heroin is to reduce pain, right? You're injecting an opioid, it acts on the opiate receptor, and you feel less pain. And so what happens when you don't have heroin anymore? The response is pain. You are literally feeling pain as your response.
Hypersensitivity because the chronic repression of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so similarly, if you work out every single day, so you get in a habit, so, you're doing an intense, 45-minute hour workout, you're releasing a bunch of endorphins, you're releasing a lot of dopamine. And by the way, I'm not saying working out's unhealthy whatsoever, but you are creating somewhat of a dependency on the neurotransmitters that are released and firing when you're working out. And so for me, it almost seems like it's gone from I feel really good when I work out to if I don't work out, I feel shitty because I haven't gotten my fix of painkillers for the day.
That is a very interesting take on it. I actually need to take a couple of days and assess whether I have shifted to that point as well. Definitely less cognizantly, if so. But am I getting more negative feedback from not going to the gym than I am getting positive feedback from going to the gym? I need to check the numbers on that.
When I started thinking about this, it completely blew my mind.
Oh man, that's sharp. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, at least in terms of myself. But no, that 100% makes sense. Like that chain of logic is flawless. And I think that a lot of people can definitely relate to that. Mm-hmm. I mean, how often do you hear from people who are regularly active, consistently working out, how bad they feel?
Yeah.
It is near universal, I would say. It does become, if not a true dependency, then at least like some strong operant conditioning. Like that gets built into you. And you're right, everything at some level affects the biochemical processes somewhere along the line. So yeah, it would not surprise me at all if there were some epigenetics, some gene tweaks, some baseline regulation that was directly in response to time spent exercising. Damn, dude. I need to go digging and see if there's some papers on this.
We have an addiction, man. We have a physical dependency on exercise. And
luckily not alcohol. And on the topic, your reposado definitely, I'm sorry, Brock. Dwayne Johnson.
They have a reposado as well, so I'd be curious to try the reposado version as well.
I think this educational experience has made me a reposado man over Blanco.
Yeah, a little more expensive, but I think it's worth it. So the other The other component is, so meditation has been a big part of my life as well, and it's been pretty life-changing, honestly. It's something I started, I would say, doing. It's another one of those things where I always was just interested in it, right? My mom growing up she spent a lot of time going back and forth between Hong Kong, and she was very, very passionate about Oriental artwork and collecting Oriental art. And so I grew up in a house that had a large appreciation for Asian culture and Asian art. And so with that, naturally, there's sort of a religious and spiritual undertone of, hey, meditation is kind of cool and Buddhism is very interesting. And so we had some books laying around our house, like John Kabat-Zinn's Wherever You Go, There You Are, or the Dalai Lama has a couple of books about mindfulness. And so I grew up with those books, and it was interesting because at first it was something that I just would read and say, man, that's super interesting. And once a week I would do a mindfulness meditation or a meta meditation. There's so many different types of meditations, but it was something that always clicked with me. And I think growing up, people thought that was pretty weird, right? Growing up in the South, it's like, whoa, man, you're into Buddhism or you're into
A
mindfulness.
rarity.
And then it was funny because then once Silicon Valley caught on back in
Headspace.
2012, 2013, it was like the biggest thing. And so, anyways, it went from being sort of a side interest of mine to being interested in mindfulness and meditation and an occasional thing to probably by freshman or sophomore year of college, I realized if I don't meditate every day, I'm much more reactive to people. I'm less in control of my emotions. I just am generally a much more selfish person. And, that's frankly, that's honestly been the biggest part of meditation that's helped me, right? Doing a consistent 20 minutes every day. I don't know what it is. We could theorize a number of reasons, but people have told me, hey, your personality's changed. You've become a little less rough around the edges. You've become basically less of a fucking asshole. And
I can relate to being there.
Yeah, and it's something.
Growth is important.
And it's odd because it's I really attribute it to a consistent meditation practice where it's literally triggering parts of your brain that are associated with empathy and connecting to others. And my point is, again, a long-winded way of explaining, I think I also have a dependency on the meditation practice. So coming full circle, my struggle right now is I want to put everything into building the current business that I'm working on. It's called Inflection Brands. We basically acquire and invest in e-commerce businesses. We've got an incredible team. It's growing nicely, but the problem is I have all of these other interests in my life. Working out, meditation. Oh, I also want to build a community and go have friends and go to dinners and have interesting conversations with people like you. And so when you actually run the numbers, it's like, man, I want to put everything into this, but I physically don't have time if I actually want to live my most fulfilled life to have that singular focus on something. So I think it puts into perspective how much these Olympic athletes or other people that are really at the top of their game are sacrificing for what they're able to accomplish.
Incredibly stated. That was beautiful. Came back around and tied it all together. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump on the coattails of what you did just do such an incredible job of explaining, but I definitely can see where you are coming from with that. And it has been one of the more difficult things that I think I've been working on for the past 3 or 4 years. There was a time where that was more or less the same way I did it. It was every club, every class, everything I could do, mostly through school and undergrad, with the goal of being that archetypical med school applicant to become a doctor down the line, but with so much less awareness of myself and my life and the actual values going into it. Also, I was kind of a bit of an asshole, and it's been a very conscious effort for years now, and still certainly an ongoing one. I need to get back on the meditation like you have been. You're inspiring me in that way. But it's been a long road coming around to make peace with there are other things to life that I want to enjoy, and maybe dumping 100 hours a week into even pre-med stuff or now med school to read every paper, to read every bit of pre-reading, to do every practice question, the trade-offs are too much for me to handle. So the appreciation for people who do put everything into one aspect, be it business or a sport or medicine or whatever you have, that is incredibly impressive. I feel like I'm rambling to it, but yeah, I've come around on the fact that I love going to jujitsu and I love getting together with friends and I love spending time with my relationship. That's a weird way to say that, but those are things that I'm not willing to give up to become the absolute best surgeon I can be. I don't need to be appointed to the top board or what have you. It can be a part of my identity without being the entire one. And honestly, I don't know which direction I feel is correct. I think it just depends on the individual. But for that reason, the people who do put every marble in one pile and send it is something that I can't relate to and am only impressed by. Simone Biles being an incredible example. Like, for a time, I played football. By the time I got to college, the trade-offs to be on the football team versus other things I wanted to do were already too much. For me to look at an NFL player and say, like, I want to be that. I want to put everything into that. My whole life would be the physique, the training to be a player on an NFL team would cost way too much. And also I wouldn't be able to make it there. So
Right.
yeah, the people where that is their identity, hats off. I love watching them.
Well, and it's interesting because it actually brings up this whole discussion around genetic potential versus mindset and willpower. And what I mean by that is there's a reality where do I wish that my parents had put me into a single sport and said, it doesn't matter how much you hate this, you're going to practice for 6 hours a day and then you're going to go to the Olympics eventually. So, who knows what it would have been. They could make me run a mile every day. They could put me on a erg rowing machine, make me be an Olympic rower. But there's a couple of factors to consider. One is that they tried to do that a little bit with tennis, and I would practice a couple hours a day, but every couple months I would get completely burned out, basically throw a temper tantrum of saying there's no fucking way I'm going to play any more tennis. I hate this sport and it's awful. I can't stand it. And I would basically just quit every few months. And so my point in saying that is that I do think that as much as parents can put a child in a sport and encourage them, and almost in some cases, you take Tiger Woods, for example, force them to play a sport, there's inherently a huge genetic component in play. Number one, for the inherent level of grittiness for a child to commit to the sport and stick with it through trial and error and heartbreak and loss and all of the emotional
and years,
all of the emotional traumas that come with being a top level athlete. So one, there's genetically a part of just having this level of natural grit and determination that frankly I didn't have as a kid. I didn't have that level of determination that wanted to play a high level of sport. So that's one piece. But then the second piece is just true physical limitations, right? And so there are kids out there, and you take Olympic rowers, for example. They have the highest VO2 maxes. They have this incredible ability to basically shuttle lactic acid out of their muscles. They're basically genetic outliers, essentially. And you look at the times that they're pulling on an erg, or you look at marathon runners that are training in the Olympics that are Kipchoge just broke a 2-hour marathon, which was fucking incredible. I mean, one of the most incredible feats of all time, running. And I think, what is that the equivalent of? Was it a 5:15 pace?
I want to say it was like in the high fours or something.
High fours
ludicrous.
Or something.
Yep. Insane. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And when you think about that, if you or I or a random selection of 1 million children were selected, we could put them on the most rigorous marathon training program, and they will never get anywhere near that. So genetic potential, it's a huge thing. I mean, it can't be denied.
Yeah. I mean, there's, for example, my aimless tangent about NFL earlier. I'm not built for it. I do not have the height or speed or strength. And even if I put everything into that, at
I don't
best,
know,
I
man.
would
You've
have.
kind of got the Clay Matthews look going on over
That's
there.
hair more than muscle. If I put everything into it, if my parents had put me into it early, if everything had worked toward it, I still, even if I have a chance, it's fractions of a chance of somebody who's naturally 5 inches taller than me. NBA, never a chance.
Right.
There was no way ever in my life, no matter what path I followed or what training regimen I was on from what age, that I would make it in the NBA. Yeah, there are absolutely ceilings. And especially when you get to, I mean, the Olympics being a great example, they just happened and are in recent memory. That level of hyper competitive athlete, except for the more skill-based ones like maybe rock climbing or archery or sharpshooting, so much of it is determined on that confluence of like the right mindset and the right genetics. And it takes both of those. And that's why I love the Olympics so fucking much.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one point I would make, though, is when you are a parent, I think that there are actually, despite genetic limitations, I do think that there are ways to control for your child to get, let's say your goal is to get, everyone wants to get their kid into an Ivy League school. They want their kid to go to Stanford and be super successful. I do think that with modern training protocols, there are some ways to back engineer into that. So, for example, get a rowing machine, have your kid and make it fun, do it with them. But if from the time they're 3 or 4 years old, they're rowing a 2K every day, or even if they're rowing or even they go run a mile every day, which by the way, I don't recommend, because I think that the risk for injury as a cross country athlete is really high. So you're going to get, plantar fasciitis, and you can get a bunch of knee issues and a variety of different issues where if your goal is to get your kid into college sports,
there's other ways to
go with a low inflammatory
golf
sport. Like
start golf.
But golf's very hard. And I think golf is really prone to the genetic dispositions, because I personally grew up playing a lot of golf, and I had one of my best friends in elementary school. We both started playing golf together. He played less than I did, and by the time, like 2 years into it, he was basically, I think by the time he was like 11 or 12, he was a scratch golfer. He was slotted to go on to play in college. And I was playing the exact same amount as him. And I'm like, why am I still shooting in the high 80s, mid 80s? And he's dropping, 67s on our home course. And I think inherently there's just a level of hand-eye coordination and natural athletic ability that I didn't have that he did. And even with that, even though he was, the best golfer at our course, he still, wasn't able to make it in the PGA Tour. So it shows you that there's this basically normal curve of athletic ability where if you want to be a pro, you pretty much have to be on, 6 standard deviations away from the mean.
For golf, pro, fair enough. Very, very, very select few. But to train for a college sport and minimize risk of injury, I think golf might not be a terrible option.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's a good point.
There might be a regional bend to it also. Like, for example, there's a lot of schools in the southern part of the country where cheerleaders can get scholarships. And let me tell you, the requirements to be a male cheerleader in college are notably below that of being a female cheerleader. If you train to be a mascot or a male cheerleader, that might be like, honestly, I think that's a wide open avenue for people who want their kids to get scholarships at big time schools.
Right. That's a good point. And what I was going to say earlier is the sport that I think about most as the least path of resistance and highest likelihood of being able to get a child into a elite school is rowing. And it's purely because, number one, you could do running, but again, high risk of injury. But the point is, with an endurance sport, yes, there's genetic limitations, but it's purely and mainly a calculation of how many miles did they put in on the road, or how many meters did they put in on the rower. And so if you start them at an early age,
that's a very, very good point.
They're going to be pretty far ahead. And so, I think that at the end of the day, right, you obviously can't put undue pressure on a kid, and you've got to be supportive and make workouts playful, because also the other thing that you don't want, I know a number of college rowers and they have serious mental health issues, right? We won't get into it, but it's just, it is such a painful sport. I don't know if you've ever done a 2K time test before.
Yeah.
But a rowing 2K on the erg is, despite, any childhood traumas, it was the most physical pain that I've ever been in my life, right? Like, your entire body is on fire, not just during it, but for about 10 or 15 minutes after. That feeling of just lactic acid, you think it's going to get better, but then it keeps building up and building up even after the workout is done. It is a nightmare.
That's a long time, for a long time rather. The way that I built workouts was, if I thought of something, I had to add it. And if I didn't want to do it, I had to add it plus like 50% in terms of reps or duration. So in college, a lot of the time I'd accidentally spend 2.5 hours at the gym. And by deliberately giving myself tasks to do that I hate the most, I ended up on the erg for a lot of my cardio because I hated it. And yeah, your hands are fucking, I'm sorry for the swears, but I remember this and haven't done it in a while because of the broken back history. But hands are claw grip, forearms are on fire, back is on fire, shoulders are on fire, legs are on fire, butt hurts from the seat. And I wasn't good. I wasn't pushing elite times or distances. I was just getting it done. And yeah, man, the only thing that even kind of compares to that for me is the Stairmaster, because I really hate that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? It is so painful to where I did a 2K time test about 13 months ago, and I pretty much either will never do it again or it's going to be in a few years. And I still do rowing workouts, but it is the worst. It is, I can't stress this enough. I think everyone should do it because they need to know what it feels like. Same with the assault bike, right? The Airdyne bike, man, that thing can kill you as well. And my point is, if you have a child that's rowing, you have to recognize that there is a lot of, when you're experiencing physical pain like that, there's inherently an emotional pain attached to it too. So I remember there's been phases recently where, one of my goals recently was run 3 miles on the road in less than 18 minutes. So have a sub 6-minute mile for 3 miles. And I was training extremely hard to where I was doing these really long interval runs where you're basically sprinting all out for 4 minutes and jogging for 4 minutes and sprinting for 4 minutes. And I would get, during that last sprint, I would literally be, I don't know if I was crying, but I think I was crying. Like, it felt like there were tears. And as if I can recall what crying feels like, I was definitely crying during the end of that run. And even after, then you finish and you're basically dry heaving and it feels awful. And all I can think in those moments is, there are college athletes out there that are doing this every day. And so either one, they are incredibly resilient. Two, they have a genetic predisposition to just have some ability to shuttle lactate much quicker through the muscles, or their lactate levels just don't get that high, like Michael Phelps. Were we talking about this recently?
I think it did come up.
Or three, they have mental health issues, man. They're not in a good spot. They don't like what they do, and they're being forced to experience painful workouts and they don't want to. So it's a fine line to balance when you're talking about children and trying to back engineer them into a college program.
Rowing's probably the best one if you're going to try it, though. I think you've sold me on that. Yeah, I mean, in imagining forward how I would intend to coach or raise my future children in the arena of sports, I guess I hadn't come at it from the angle of how would I or what sport would I if it was for the future purpose of some benefit or admission. But I guess always imagined myself absolutely making, air quotes, making them do sports, but trying to mitigate the parental forcing aspect by letting it be whatever sport they want to try. If that means they're doing wrestling for half a year, then cheerleading for another, then football. Well, maybe not football. That one,
CT, man.
Yeah,
I
maybe
don't think you can do
maybe
it.
not football.
Yeah.
Rugby,
They
soccer.
can be a punter though.
Yeah,
Kicker.
absolutely. Whatever, baseball, golf, anything they want to do, as long as it's, engendering the lessons that you learn from a sport, like failure not being the end of the world, and like dealing with the suck, putting yourself through struggle and difficult times so that you become stronger. I don't know that I at least imagine myself giving them the freedom to flip between them all, because I don't want to be that parent whose identity hinges on the success of their child in a sport, nor do I want to be the parent that causes lasting trauma or severe emotional unwellness in my child for the sake of a sport. I think the concept of sports, at least in my mind, has more value than success in any given sport, if that makes sense.
Right.
But then there's different things to aim at. College admission, the opportunity to be a champion in your field, that takes dedication, and that takes a more singularity in your purpose than go ahead and sample everything.
Right.
So even that, of course, everything is Goldilocks. There's a trade-off.
There's a great individual that I follow and have had a couple of brief conversations with. His name is Seven. He was the former head of videography and media at CrossFit.
Wow.
So he's super funny, just really, really charismatic guy. He's got a podcast called the Josh, Matt, and Seven podcast. So it's with Josh Bridges, who is the Navy SEAL CrossFitter. It's got Matthew Frazier as well, who is the 5-time CrossFit champion, and Saban. Great podcast. Listen to it. It's very funny, but also very informative. But anyways, he's got 3 young boys. I think they're, I don't know, let's call it 6, 7, and 8 years old. And he's got this fantastic Instagram, which I think it's called something like three brothers playing or something like that. And he has built out just this incredible home gym that is customized for young boys or girls.
Goodness.
To where he's got the mini pull-up bars. He's got small Rogue medicine balls that are like 4 pounds. And there are all these amazing videos of him putting his kids through workouts that are really fun to do, right? Like jump over this bar and then do a bunch of pull-ups and, do a burpee and stuff like that. And you watch the kids and you listen to what they say in these videos, and they love working out. They absolutely love it. They find it enjoyable. They think that it's play. And I think that if you can take a kid and basically instill the idea that physical activity is a good thing, using your body in a healthy way is a positive, thing to do, then that kid's going to be much better off both physically and mentally. Especially you look at just the rates of ADD, and they're prescribing these, bullshit Adderall and Vyvanse and Concerta. And it's like, you're giving a kid a drug that is literally just methamphetamine, but you're basically just altering the chemistry a little bit, and it's a repurposed amphetamine salt. It's ridiculous.
They hit me with that in 2nd grade. Thankfully, stopped after about 1.5 years. But yeah, I had teachers saying like, hey, you don't seem like yourself.
Right.
Just kind of dampens the whole personality.
Right. And that happens to a lot of children like me that are high type A, high energy. They're kind of just, and you think, how much better would we have been if every morning there was not some shitty PE class, but it's like, we're going to do a CrossFit workout, or we're going to do a timed mile, and the energy that you're able to release, the positive chemicals in your brain that basically start flowing from that, I think it would completely eliminate ADD. And, not completely eliminate. I know that there are medical exceptions. I understand, but I very firmly believe that the majority of those cases do not need amphetamines prescribed to fix it. And so the last thing I'll mention on this point is it's really impressive to see what Seven has done with his children, where, for example, I don't know if have you done a 100 burpee challenge before?
I don't think explicitly. We had one particular workout with the rugby team that I think we did that, but it was in separate sets. Burpees have for my entire life been my bane among every single exercise I've done, which has to be in like, if not the multiple dozens, probably low hundreds of varieties of exercise. I think burpees might be the singular one that I suffer during the most.
That's interesting.
I don't know
I wonder
why.
why that is.
I kind of have a short torso and thick legs, and I wonder if it's like a biomechanic thing, but just burpees crush me. So I don't know if I could.
Just got to get the cardio in check, man.
So what is this challenge?
You do 100 burpees, and basically however quickly you can do 100 burpees is a good test of your metabolic fitness. And so mine is, and it's honestly, it's not a good score at all. It's like 8:10 or something like that. 8 minutes, 10 seconds. CrossFitters are most professional CrossFitters are usually doing sub 5 minutes, which is just ridiculous.
Oh my God.
But his kids are doing 458 100 burpee challenges. And
that's
it's
insane.
like, and then they're also doing these 100 pull-up challenges, and that takes me like 20 minutes. They're just crushing them, and they love doing it. And so it's kind of just like it's a big inspiration to realize, oh, your kids don't have to hate working out. They don't have to resent physical exercise. They can love it. You can make it fun. You just have to be super attentive and present and there with them when they're growing up.
I don't know that there's, aside from maybe talking about good nutrition, which is, I would say, more amorphous and up for debate, depending on the individual. I don't know that there's a more effective or efficient minute for minute way of promoting lifelong health and well-being in a child than that. That is probably the highest yield way that you can set someone up for a successful life.
Right.
Talk about downstream benefits, especially if you're presenting these fun exercises in the manner that you're talking about, with the support and positivity and the kind reinforcement. They're getting love and nourishment and understanding about what their body can do, and pushing their body and trials and tribulations and overcoming those. That's mental health. That's physical health. That's good habits. That's happy memories. That's like a holistic, that's a multivitamin for lifelong health that you can give a child.
Yep, exactly. And especially if you're doing the workouts with them or sort of participating in it, because your kids, you're their hero. I mean, if you treat them well and you provide for them, you are a child's hero if you're their father or their mother, right? You're their entire world, basically. And so if they see you loving a workout and they see you enjoying physical activity, they're going to be inspired by the same thing.
Absolutely. That's the mirror neurons at work. They'll emulate the role models that they see. I'm pretty stoked to have children. Can't wait, but gonna wait.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, no, I am. I mean, that's a huge value in my life. I mean, I think that's obviously, there's the critique of, oh, you get a job, get a house, get married, have kids, then die. But I think that there's a reason that humans have done that for, well, now we think it's millions of years.
Biological drives at least part of it.
Right. But, I think that there's an inherent satisfaction in raising a family and seeing these beautiful creatures come into the world, and you're able to raise them and inspire them. And obviously there's super shitty times that are really annoying, like changing a diaper and whatnot. And by the way, I'm totally on a soapbox right now because I don't have kids. And I bet there's a lot of newborn parents right now that are like, dude, shut the fuck up. This sucks, man. Obviously we love our kid, but it's a lot worse than it sounds. But my point is, overall, it's from the data I've gathered, it's a very rewarding experience. It's a way to deepen your relationship, and it's basically your best path to having a legacy. So I'm excited for it. I think that obviously, that's 10 years down, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Who knows? But there's a lot to learn between now and then. There's a lot that I want to accomplish between now and then. And yeah, I mean, that's a later conversation.
We can table it for now, but yeah, the opportunity to take whatever lessons, hopefully more than a few that I've learned throughout my life, and be able to impart that. Not that it's necessarily a head start in any way, but it feels like a privilege to be able to take whatever struggles and challenges and nuggets of wisdom that I've collected and impart them. It's like,
Yeah.
This is the starting off point. I think that I've learned a few things. Certainly, I've become kinder and more considerate. And if I can, that's the goal, right? Generation to generation, we want everyone to be growing, to be kinder, more self-sufficient, more competent and capable. And it is a thrill to look forward to, but certainly not the priority right now.
Yeah.
So we have come up to a pretty good amount of time. I got to say, we're not hurting for things to say. We could probably keep going for several hours more. But on this, the first time you've been on a podcast, is there anything else you do want to hit? Any particular topics you brought up? Anything you want to revisit? I could ask questions about your business for days, but...
Yeah, what do you want to know?
So you purchase and acquire e-commerce companies. Is that a correct remembrance of how you explained it?
Exactly. So I can give a little bit of background that might be helpful. So like I mentioned, I've always loved entrepreneurship. I've always been interested in the process of building and ultimately exiting businesses. And all of my heroes growing up were always titans of industry. And what an odd thing to have as a hero growing up, right? Typically it's, Superman or Batman or whatever. But for me, it was Warren Buffett and Cornelius Vanderbilt and all of these incredible business figures that I would just watch endless documentaries on. I would read endless books on, and was just so fascinated by the whole process. And, I think that a lot of that, I have to give a ton of credit to my parents here, because they were both in business. My mom was on Wall Street for 25 years. My dad has, owned and operated and been involved in a number of businesses. And so growing up at the dinner table, the conversation revolved around business and ventures and investing and things like that. And so it was just something that I was always exposed to. And so going back to this point of your parents being your hero, they weren't doing workouts in front of me, but they were talking about business, and I could see the passion, and essentially it kind of instilled the same interest in me. And so it was something I was always interested in, and I just kept pursuing that. And like I mentioned, there were a number of businesses that I had. Just going to grab some water really quickly.
Absolutely.
So there were a number of small businesses that I started. None of them were particularly successful. I started a backpack business in high school. I started a couple of supplements businesses online in college. I started a couple of apps and just sort of, dabbled in a bunch of different things and had a little bit of success here and there. But for the most part, nothing that blew anyone away, nothing that was at all worth, calling home about. And so it was probably sophomore year of college when I said, okay, I'm passionate about business, but at this point in my life, there's two things I don't have. One, I don't have an idea that I think is a multi-million or billion-dollar idea. Two, I don't understand how to properly raise and deploy capital, which is absolutely critical for building, scaling, and ultimately selling a business. So what can I do to learn those necessary skills, and what can I do to make the right connections to ultimately succeed in business? And so selfishly, I actually had my own interest in, I basically was torn between, do I want to work on Wall Street or do I want to start a business? Because I also loved stock trading. I was obsessed with my personal Charles Schwab account. I would day trade all the time and I loved it, right? I was super passionate about anything around deals, business, finance, venture capital, etc. And so I basically said to myself, look, I've got time. I don't need to rush into starting a business. I am really interested in mergers and acquisitions. I enjoy the kind of Wall Street deal making. Let me go find a job in investment banking, learn the ropes a little bit, understand how capital is syndicated, deployed, raised, etc. How do business leaders interact with each other? Just basically get a lay of the land a little bit. So I began working at a company called Piper Jaffray, which is a leading investment bank focused on mergers and acquisitions. So we would advise companies through the sale of a business, or we would advise companies when they were buying a business. So it's called the sell side or the buy side.
Definitely pertinent to your eventual goal of beginning and leaving businesses.
Exactly. And so after a while, the start, I was learning a ton. It was an incredible experience. The hours were awful. I mean, it's just there's no sleep, but there were experiences and things that I learned that I will take with me for the rest of my life. There were people that I worked with that are still to this day, it's inspirational, and how smart they were, how thoughtful they were, and how incredible of communicators they were with some of the top business leaders in the world. So you really got this sense and foundation of, here's how business works. Here's how it works at the highest levels. Here's how you have to interact with people. Here are the presentations that you're supposed to make depending on a different deal, et cetera. I know I'm being very high level here because I don't want to bore you with finance details, but the point is I worked with incredible people. I got great experience, but basically, I'm trying to think how much I can share here, but basically we did a number of deals, and it completely opened my eyes to the fact that there was an industry that was growing extremely rapidly, and there were several businesses in that space that we had specifically advised on that sold for, one sold for 600 million, another sold for 397 million, and they were all protein bar companies. And so my perspective was, I understand this space because our firm has advised on these deals. So I understand the industry as a whole. 2, I now know how to go raise capital and pitch investors and basically syndicate the financing needed to grow this business. And 3, I have a personal passion for this space. Functional food is huge for me. I mean, I have tried probably every diet known to mankind that at least makes some amount of sense, whether it's keto or paleo or vegan or vegetarian or paleo or pescatarian, or I could literally keep going forever. There's so many of them, but I've tried so many different diets. I've researched a ton of them, and I just had this huge passion for the space. And so my perspective was, right now, the protein bars that are out there, you've got Quest Bar that it's high protein, it's low carb. So from a macronutrient standpoint, it's healthy, but it's got artificial sweeteners in it. It's got all these sketchy iso, malto, oligosaccharides in it, like IMOs. It's got a bunch of ingredients that aren't healthy. On the other side, you've got clean label bars like RX Bar and, name any protein bar, right? But they'll be clean ingredients, but they're still filled with sugar. And so my perspective was, there's a huge market gap here where we need to create something that is both great from a macro standpoint, so high protein, low net carb, but also clean ingredients. So I left investment banking. I started a company called NextBar, NXTBAR. You can go to nextbar.com. Try some. They're delicious.
Heck yeah.
But the point is, so started that company with the pure end goal in mind of ultimately selling the business, right? You scale it for a few years and then sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we basically, so we grew that business. I built, really, I can't take credit for it. My team was amazing. They did so much. And they built this business, and we sold that in June of 2021 to a public company.
Recently. Congratulations again. Well, how much of your incredible team were you directly responsible for hiring, recruiting, bringing into the fold?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, all of them, but
then a fair share of the credit, I think, does belong still at your desk.
Yeah, but I think that it's a big lesson as a leader to recognize at what point you stop controlling your employees and you start working for your employees. And beyond that, also just giving them autonomy, giving them the ability, and again, this is full circle, but giving people the ability to be in control of the strategy and let them make decisions. And guess what? it's really scary, and they're going to make mistakes, and you're going to want to just yell at the top of your lungs because it's like, how could you ever make a mistake like this? But the reality is, you can never scale a business if you're not willing to relinquish control. And so all of the great entrepreneurs have at some point decided, okay, I no longer run this business, my employees run this business, and I'm here to, number one, put out fires, and number two, be there as a support system to make sure that initiatives are being pushed along, people have the resources that they need to succeed, and they know what the vision is for the company. And so if you can accomplish those three things, the rest will really fall into place if you hire the right people. We've hired bad people and ultimately had to fire them. And, that also is a learning lesson. Like, you get to understand, well, who are the people that can have a sense of autonomy, that can implement a strategic initiative, and, who are the right people for certain types of roles. And so, yeah, it was a fantastic team. They deserve almost all the credit, and ultimately so exited that business to a public company, and then in the meantime started building a business called Inflection Brands. And so that business is, we basically acquire and invest in e-commerce businesses with a specific focus on businesses that sell through Amazon FBA. Amazon FBA is fulfilled by Amazon. What that means is
the third-party sellers through Amazon's marketplace.
Correct. So I'll give you an example. Right here, I'm holding a glass tumbler glass. And if you go on Amazon and search tumbler glass, you'll come up with a number of results, and you'll probably pick the one that has 20,000 reviews with an average of 4.5 stars.
Yep. You've called it.
Well, what people don't realize is that product, it's not a brand that, for the most part, it's not a brand that sells anywhere else. That is a brand that someone sourced the product from China. They ship it directly into an Amazon warehouse. They create a listing on the Amazon marketplace, and then over time generate a ton of reviews and just do some back-end optimizations to get that many reviews and be able to sell the most.
I've been a part of a lot of them, because you usually get a $10 Amazon gift card if you review for 5 stars or whatever.
Exactly. So the point is, there are tens of thousands of these businesses that don't exist anywhere except for on Amazon. So there are these Amazon private label sellers. Well, the beauty of it is, these are businesses that are operating at, between a 25 and 35% net margin. They're highly profitable. The number one tumbler glass on Amazon is probably doing $2 million a year in net profit. So if you can imagine how big this space is and how much opportunity there is for consolidation. So when we started this business, our goal was to basically acquire 10 businesses in the space and build a portfolio of these Amazon private label businesses. And like many businesses, your plan just evolves over time. And so where we're at now is, we've realized that, number one, a ton of capital has come into the space. We were a pretty early mover on this, but there were some competitors of ours that were backed by massive hedge funds, huge private equity firms. And basically I won't say how much, but we basically had a 10-figure investment lined up to go and acquire these businesses. But what happened is, people had, billion-dollar war chests and started driving up the valuations. So where we're at now is, we'll still operate the acquisition model, but we're much less aggressive on valuation than some of these other players. And so that's essentially allowing them to win a lot of the deals that we would otherwise want. However, where our competitive advantage is, and where we are differentiated, is instead of buying a business outright. So let's call Tumbler Glass, company A. So we'll go to company A and say, listen, because we talk to a ton of sellers that say, yeah, I just don't want to sell my business yet. Right. Like, I know I've gotten a ton of offers, et cetera, but I just want to hold on to it. So what we say is, okay, you can keep the majority of your business. How about instead, we will either invest, $1 or $2 million, or we'll outright buy like 10 or 20% of your company. We'll implement all of our resources and playbook and then allow you to double or triple the size of this business. And then, 3 or 4 years down the road, go and sell it to one of the very, very aggressive buyers. So what we do is, and this is our core competency, is minority focused, non-control based investments into these Amazon FBA private label businesses. So, it's obviously we've iterated a little bit, but it's growing extremely quickly. I mean, I think we're up to 10 employees now. And so, yeah, it's been a really fun space to be a part of. I'm personally really passionate about all things e-commerce, and we have a pretty differentiated strategy. So I think we're excited to just keep growing the team, keep growing the portfolio, and build something with some legacy behind it.
Absolutely. I imagine the post-COVID era e-commerce is as large as it's ever been and only growing faster than before. It seems definitely like a good space for business growth from an untrained eye.
It is, absolutely. I think that the general consensus is that COVID pushed forward the growth on e-commerce by about 3 years to take us to a new baseline that's about, I think volume overall is up like 40 or 50%.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am a avid Amazon subscriber, and definitely that's where I get most of my non-food items. So I guess I'm a part of that movement.
Yeah, most of, and you might not even have known this, but a lot of those products are just one dude in a garage with his laptop.
I actually did not. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It does explain some of the ridiculous brand diversity that you see, though, and why there's 100 versions of every top product.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there are risks with this space. So, it's not without, obviously when I pitch it, it's all rosy, but the reality is that there are scary components to this model. So number one is Amazon can take your listing down whenever they want. So if you're selling tumbler glasses, Amazon can decide either one, that it wants to sell tumbler glasses, it's going to launch an Amazon Essentials brand and then take half of your market share overnight. The other thing that can happen is there's a tremendous amount of foul play on the Amazon marketplace. It's gotten cleaned up a lot in the past couple of years, but it's still incredibly volatile and very dangerous to sell on Amazon in a number of different cases. So what will happen is if I'm selling tumbler glasses, you're going to have a bunch of competitors. If you're the number one listing, or even if you're in the top 5 or 10, you're going to have a lot of people that want that spot. And a lot of them are actually in China. So 47% of all e-commerce sellers on Amazon are based out of China. The reason for that is Shenzhen, China is literally the manufacturing headquarters of the world for private label products. So you just have so much manufacturing there. And now a lot of the manufacturers are starting to sell their own products on Amazon instead of selling to a middleman who then lists it on Amazon. So the point is, what can happen is if you're selling tumbler glasses and I say, I want to ruin you, basically, I can do a number of things. Number one, I can hijack your listing. So because Amazon Marketplace is an open marketplace system, it means that anyone can sell products on any listing as long as you have the same product. So for example,
fulfilled by, and there will be different store options.
Exactly.
From the consumer side, that's what I see.
So for example, 818 Tequila, if they sold on Amazon, if I owned 818 Tequila, if I went and bought a case from the liquor store, I could list it on Amazon and it would say sold by Richard Lindemann. So you can have all these sellers on your listing. Well, there are ways to protect yourself and basically be the sole provider on a listing, but it's too nuanced for this conversation. But the point is, some sellers will basically do what's called hijacking your listing. So what they'll do is they'll get control of your listing and then they'll start posting either pornographic content or say that, we're selling a nuclear bomb or we're selling grenades.
Straight up trash spam to get the listing
They'll
removed.
spam your listing. They'll take it down. Their product will shoot up to the top of the ranking. And then it's really hard to
do
get
the
that
same to them
back
without foul play.
Yeah. And so thankfully, Amazon has cleaned up a lot of that, but there are still very creative ways that these black hat operators are attacking listings. So one is they used to leave bad reviews on Amazon. So they would say, oh, I got this product and there were razor blades in it and my daughter, cut herself and then we had to go to the hospital. And they'd just make up some crazy story and then send in a complaint and the listing would get taken down and you have to spend 3 weeks trying to fight it with Amazon. Well, Amazon got pretty privy to that and was able to basically sniff out what was fake and what wasn't. Well, and they've also gotten better about this, but then what people started doing is Amazon started cracking down on fake positive reviews. So if I'm the number one seller of tumbler glasses, it used to be really easy 3 years ago to put up 100 super positive reviews that were all fake, and then it immediately doubles my revenue.
I've wondered that. I've seen some listings, especially more so in the past, where you're like, this just something feels fishy about this string of consistently poor grammar, perfect reviews. And you're like, these have the same flavor.
Exactly. They're using the same kind of sentence structure for each of them.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's very astute that you picked up on that. But the point is, Amazon takes that really seriously now because their credibility is everything. So if people stop trusting the reviews on Amazon, then Amazon doesn't have a market value anymore. It's not a true marketplace. And so they started taking that very seriously. And if you're a black hat operator, you can use that to your advantage. So if you're the number one tumbler glass, you're probably guessing what I'm going to do. I'm going to go on your listing and leave 10 really positive reviews that all sound kind of similar. And then I'm going to report it to Amazon and say, hey, I think this company is putting fake reviews on their listing.
Oh, this is so devious.
I know.
As someone who is not, innately invested in business or educationally and professionally in that world, these are things that I don't think about. Like, maybe I noticed that there's some sketchy series of fake reviews, but the depth and complexity that some of these schemes have to game the system and shift the rankings, that's crazy. And I mean, again, you mentioned a single tumbler might be moving 2 million in sales. Now multiply all of this fraudulence across all of the unique products or product categories on Amazon, and there is a ludicrous volume of this stuff going on.
There is. So for the most part, Amazon's very clean and it's a massive business opportunity. But I think that anyone that wants to get into the space or invest in the space just has to be wary of what the issues are. You have to have operational competencies to deal with these issues when they arise. And it goes deep, man. I mean, it was something, I think it was 6 months ago now, that there's a group called ASTG on Amazon. They're basically a seller group. They also run a consulting firm that helps sellers get their listings back up when they get delisted. And the founder of that, and I have no opinion as to whether there is guilt or no guilt. So this is purely just, you can look this up in the news. They were recently indicted by the FBI. Amazon went to basically uncovered this huge scheme where this group, it was basically the consulting firm that would help you get your Amazon products back up onto the marketplace if they got taken down. They had a network of agents working within Amazon that they were bribing to basically, so if, let's say you're a $10 million seller on Amazon, you come to me, I'm the consultant, and I would say, all right, man, I need, because you're losing $100,000 a week, basically, for every week that your listings are down. So I'm going to say, listen, your products are suspended right now. Amazon's saying there's no chance of getting them back up. Your business is completely gone. So you're saying, I'll do whatever the fuck it takes to get my business back up, because, and this, a lot of times it was businesses that, it wasn't businesses that had gotten attacked by competitors. It was the black hat operators that were doing sketchy things. They got caught, and Amazon said, "You're done. Like you're getting taken down." And so, if you're in that situation, you're losing $100,000 a week. I come to you and say, if you give me $250,000, I can go pay off this employee at Amazon. He's going to go into the system and get your listings reinstated. So that's what this group was doing. And I think that they might have, again, I'm not opining here. I'm not, presuming guilt at all, but I read the entire indictment, the 50-page document, and there were briefcases of cash getting passed to employees of Amazon to get people's businesses back up online.
That's crazy. It feels so old school. You wouldn't think that that's still a pathway.
And I think what happened is maybe, whoever was involved in this probably thought, look, it's Amazon. It's not like I'm bribing a government official or anything. It's just kind of like, hey, here's some money, get my Amazon listing, not realizing that, no, the FBI will come after this. And this is a crime. This is bribery. This is market manipulation.
Yeah,
so
serious crimes.
Yeah. So it's been really wild to watch some of the Amazon drama play out.
It's a good time to have clean hands in that market.
Exactly.
Dang. Thank you so much for giving that overview. I feel like I have a much better understanding, although still a very fuzzy and high level understanding. I think that there's a lot of background knowledge I need to have to absorb more of the lessons from your wisdom. But man, it sounds like you are so well positioned. You personally, not necessarily am I capable of making a judgment on your company, but it sounds like you have all of the skills, the right attitude, in the right position. You know what you need to do. I'm so impressed. I cannot wait to see where your next business venture takes you.
Well, thank you. I'm equally impressed. The first time that we met, it's not often that I meet people that have read basically every single book that I've read. I mean, you basically, there's a book by Paul Saladino, and I was like, holy shit, I thought I was the only person in Texas that has read this very nuanced book on diet. So it was really cool to meet you. I think we're interested in a lot of the same things, and just excited to be in Austin and build this relationship.
Absolutely, man. Always happy to make a new friend, and damn if I'm not lucky with the incredible people that I meet.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is, or has been, A Couple of Fellas. Catch y'all next week.